there are some interesting news items coming out about the war on drugs that's really going hot in Mexico. As a matter of fact, there is a report out that shows that U.S. Special Operations troops are on the ground in Baja California, specifically in Mexico, collecting intelligence and also getting potentially their hands dirty a little bit, taking out cartel sites. Now, let's talk about what's going on. What I'm talking about today comes primarily from an article in a online intelligence website. This is a subscribers only website that costs about a couple $1,000s a year to subscribe to. And they are not some fly by night organization. They are very serious intel guys. They can cut through the chatter, let's say, with the kind of stuff that's coming out. So while what I'm about to talk about is not corroborated through the US government, of course, the US government is not going to admit to any of this anyway, but this is one of the only places that's reporting this deeply on this topic. Just keep that in mind. And it is not gospel. It's just likely good information to know. And what they're saying in this article is that there are small groups of U.S. Special Operations Forces. This would be like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. And just to give you some context, what I need to do is explain that a little bit further, because I know a lot of people are not familiar with Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Special Operations Forces. What's the difference with all these different special ops forces the United States has? And so to put it simply, there's a hierarchy, and the top special operations forces in the United States are called Tier 1 operators. They're called Tier 1 because there's only one general between them and the president. That would be the JSOC commander, Joint Special Operations Command commander. So let's talk about the different levels of special operations, Tier 1 units. So a Tier 1 unit, there are Army Rangers, there are Navy SEALs, there are Green Berets, which are known as the Special Forces, and there are some Air Force units like Joint Tactical Aircraft Controllers and pararescuemen and things like that. And then you have like aviation units like Task Force 160th, which is a helicopter unit that flies Little Birds and other helicopters. They're the best helicopter pilots on planet Earth. There's no question about that. They're the best helicopter. Matter of fact, I think I have a video of them here. If I can find what I did with it. There it is. I'll turn the audio off on that. But these are attack helicopters, 6s. They're called Little Birds, okay? And they have MH6 and AH6s. And these are flown by Task Force 160th. They are extremely deadly and accurate. You see the guys hanging on the outside of the helicopter here. These guys are extremely good pilots. They have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours, some of them. They have those rocket pods on the side of the helicopters, and they aim those things by aiming the helicopter. They don't aim the rocket pods. They actually aim the helicopter, and they'll just take a grease pencil and put a little cross on the windscreen. These guys are fast roping out of, that was pretty slow fast roping, but they're fast roping out of a Little Bird. You can do that as well. They fly other things besides Little Birds, but this is just an idea of what the Task Force 160th helicopters can do. Okay, so those are all Tier 1 units. Now, they all have different jobs. As you can see here, Task Force 160th, their job is to get other special operations units to the battlefield, to target, and drop them off, and then support them by fire by using their 2.75-inch rockets on the pod right there on the side, or they have miniguns where they can fire a machine gun at about 4,000 rounds a minute. That is extremely deadly. And so they're firing rockets, 2.75-inch rockets. So that's what Task Force 160th does. The Rangers are like just think of it as the president's kickoff team. The Rangers are specialists in killing people and breaking things. And so they are designed and trained to be the most lethal fighting force on planet Earth. And so they very much are always there when there's a special operations mission, but they're usually on the outskirts. What they do is they'll take, let's say, Delta Force, which I'll talk about in a second, and they will accompany them into an objective. they will take up blocking positions around the objective, and they will protect the other special operations units that are going into the objective to take out a hostage or rescue a hostage, take out a kingpin, some kind of bad guy, capture, kill missions, that sort of thing. So the Rangers are there to absolutely decimate any opposition. So then you have the Green Berets. Now, the Green Berets have a different primary mission. The Green Berets, or the Special Forces, okay, now, again, you got to make a differentiation between Special Operations Forces, because Special Operations Forces encompass everybody in Special Ops. Rangers, Task Force 160, SEALs, everybody. And the Special Forces is the Green Berets. The Green Berets' main mission is to train local partner forces. So they're going to go into Yemen and they're going to train Yemeni forces to take on the Houthis, something like that. That's their primary mission. A lot of people that are Rangers, they call themselves Rangers, and they're allowed to do that, are people who just went through Ranger School, which is actually just a leadership course that's based on the Special Operations Unit. So it's not a Special Operations course per se. It's just a leadership course, but they call it Ranger School. And so guys that are like in the infantry or something can go through Ranger School and get that leadership training, how to lead men in combat, and then take that back to their units. And they can wear the Ranger tab, but they're not going to wear the Ranger scroll, which is the unit patch for the Rangers, which is the Special Operations Unit. According to leaked information, they're sending teams of guys 2 at a time into Mexico to infiltrate these drug networks and figure out where the drugs are being made, how they're being shipped, what the shipping routes are, what the hide sites are, where the tunnels are that go into the United States, or how they're getting them into the US and all that sort of thing. In so doing, we're putting some US forces that are likely on the ground inside Mexico that are at tremendous risk to themselves. They are putting themselves at tremendous risk to gather that kind of information. Now, the article goes a step further. And again, this is the article on Intelligence Online, and it alleges that these US military forces are not only training their counterparts, they're training special units of the Mexican military. One of them is called, they call it GAIN, GAIN, but that's a Spanish acronym. It's a counterterrorism force recruited, vetted, and trained by the CIA. And then ostensibly, US Special Forces are going in to train them and potentially even go on missions with them. This is the key here. We just don't know exactly what they're doing on the ground because that's obviously highly classified. But if they are on the ground conducting kinetic missions, this would be a real step up in the ladder of escalation of our war against the cartels. Now, President Trump has made threats to potentially strike these cartels from the air in Mexico. And Pete Hegseth has talked about it too. We may send drones in there and start drone striking these cartel members, to which Gloria Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, just about set her hair on fire. She obviously is not going to like that at all. And President Trump's answer to that is, if she doesn't like it, then maybe she should do something about it. My friend Oscar Blue Ramirez is pretty confident that not just the lower level politicians, but even up to and including President Sheinbaum are in the pocket of the cartels, that Mexico is essentially a failed state that is controlled by the cartels, and the government is there in name only, or to at least to function as a buffer for the cartels with governments like the United States. But if we are able to clamp down on the source of these drugs, then we will certainly reduce the amount of demand. So you could make that argument right back at Mexico, that she says, if you would just address the demand, then you wouldn't need to address the supply. And our answer should be, addressing the supply is addressing the demand for drugs. No two ways about it. So you add to that the fact that now the cartels are putting out bounties on ICE agents. This is Kristi Noem on Fox News the other day talking about that. Take a listen.
We have specific officers and agents that have bounties that have been put out on their heads. It's been $2,000 to kidnap them, $10,000 to kill them. They've released their pictures. They're actually going out there and saying, kill these people and we'll give you this much money to do it.
So if the cartels are putting bounties on the heads of American law enforcement, and aside from the fact that they're pumping millions of pills of fentanyl into the United States, cocaine, marijuana, everything coming in, human trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking, doing all these kinds of things in the course of their illicit activities, I don't think it's a real stretch for the Trump administration to declare that these people are a threat to national security. Think about it. If Iran sent a bunch of agents over to the United States and killed 100,000 Americans in 1 year, we would be at war with Iran. But yet we've had 100,000 people a year dying from fentanyl overdoses, and much of that fentanyl is brought in through Mexico. And the precursor chemicals are sent by China. So China is definitely involved in that. How is that not an act of war? Because they're killing us in our own country. That makes it worse. That doesn't make it less of a threat. It makes it more of a threat. I have no problem whatsoever with these guys, whether they're going in from land, from air, or by the sea. I would say that most of these guys that are going into Baja California are likely going in by sea, but going in and actually taking these cartels to task, whether or not it's being done kinetically by U.S. troops or not. It's more likely that the U.S. troops that are in Mexico are training Mexican special operations forces and then supporting them with intelligence and stuff as they go in and take out the bad guys. That takes U.S. troops sort of one step removed from the danger and makes it less likely that we'll have U.S. troops killed in that operation. Now, I want to talk about President Petro in Colombia. This guy he's a piece of work. Bless his little heart, pea-picking heart. He is a staunch communist. He is a former guerrilla who back in the 80s was involved in violent struggle against the government in Colombia. He's been in politics now for a long time. And he's, like I said, just a diehard communist. He's good friends with Nicolas Maduro. And so he has been running interference for Maduro on the military buildup in the Caribbean. And he gave a speech, and what I did was translated it from Spanish into English using an artificial intelligence program. It might sound a little weird. If President Petro stutters or does something like that, the AI will make it stutter in English. I wish it didn't do that. But I'm going to stop it at various points and kind of comment on what he had to say about what we're doing in the Caribbean Sea.
Sailing the sea, but had its engines lifted and therefore was stationary, which was hit by a missile.
That's
when facing the issue in the Caribbean Sea, which has nothing to do with fentanyl, what the United States is producing is what it wants is the oil from Venezuela.
Okay, so he says, number one, that this has nothing to do with fentanyl, what's happening in the Caribbean. And he's somewhat correct about that. The fentanyl is something that comes out of Mexico. The precursor chemicals that make fentanyl come in from China to Mexico and then are made primarily in Mexico. So he's right about that this doesn't have to do with fentanyl. But what it does have to do with is cocaine. So he doesn't mention that. He's just, they're talking about fentanyl and we have nothing to do with fentanyl. And it's hard to tell from looking at the footage that they're releasing what's in those boats. But what you need to understand is that the United States has much better capability in terms of surveillance than what they are showing to you and me. And with that in mind, the U.S. says we know who's in those boats and we are 100% sure that those were drug boats. Then I believe them.
We still do not know the exact point. There are already young fishermen who left their homes in Santa Marta and have not returned.
So he's saying that there may be some Colombians that have not returned that were on fishing expeditions.
It is not yet time to say anything definitive, but we are concerned because their families are calling.
In part through narcotics, And they were insurgent commanders, and they were killed by an airstrike across the border they were just across the border in Ecuador. And that airstrike was affected by the Colombian Air Force, but the Colombian Air Force never flew into Ecuador. They just used these glide bombs. They stayed in Colombian airspace and they dropped their bombs, and the bombs glided into Ecuador and landed on this camp, the FARC camp, and blew it up. Caused a major diplomatic sort of dust up between Ecuador and Colombia, and also Venezuela was pretty upset about that. Hugo Chavez was real upset about that. But that wasn't the only time. So the people that they were killing, they killed a guy named Jorge Briceño in 2010 in a Colombian operation. And there were some other FARC commanders that were struck by these bombs. So that's what Petro is referring to. So he's actually apologizing to the Colombian people for the Colombian government taking out narco kingpins in their country. I'm really sorry. The Colombian government should have never gone after Colombian citizens, saying nothing of the fact that these Colombian citizens were, in fact, narco terrorists that were taking people hostage. So at that time, between 2006 and 2010, in Colombia, there were quite a few U.S. special operations forces operating inside that country. I know some of them personally, and they were training and equipping the Colombian military. They were offering intelligence support to the Colombian military. They were also taking part in kinetic operations against the FARC. This book is all about how the Delta Force operators tracked down Pablo Escobar in Colombia and took him off the board. They unalived Pablo Escobar. That was done by U.S. Special Operations Forces with the Delta Force. And I'm good friends with the guy who was the commander of Delta Force at that time, Jerry Boykin. And he's told me all about it. And at the time, they gave credit for that operation to the Colombian military who was there, but it was actually U.S. troops that took him out. So all of that to say, there is an actual precedent for conducting military operations under the table in Latin American countries by the United States. FARC made a habit of taking hostages as a form of currency. We've just seen that happen in Israel with Hamas. And I have been predicting this, that we are going to see more hostage taking around the globe by bad actors, whether it's by the cartels in Mexico, by Hezbollah, Hamas, other terror groups. And because the war in Israel has shown all the bad players in the world that hostage taking pays off. I just really believe that we're going to see more hostage taking as time goes on. So as these cartels are being targeted by the U.S. military, they're not going to go quietly. They're not going to just give up. They have very large organizations. They have a tremendous amount of money, and they use that money to hire mercenaries. They have their own intelligence apparatus. So the CIA is not the only one that's collecting signals intelligence or human intelligence on both sides of the border. The cartels are doing so in the United States as well. And that's why it is so concerning to see that the cartels are putting bounties on the heads of U.S. law enforcement, because how long will it be if the U.S. starts striking in Venezuela, in Colombia, in Mexico, before the cartels start to take hostages and use them as human shields and put America in the same dilemma that Israel has been in over the last couple of years?